Hi folks, it's me again, just taking you through some key points to help you fill out the SC5 for assessment point 4. Again, I'm going to try and talk primary and secondary, so forgive me while I chop back and forth from the slight differences between our two programs. So I'm going to try and present to you the standard assessment point pro forma that we're using for AP4. There's only going to be a few changes to this, just because to reflect the strange situation that we're in now. Just as you'll do with AP5, if you want to signal to us that you've had quite a bit of absence, either COVID-19 related or your own childcare commitments, etc., you might want to flag it up here. But of course, we do know what your situation is. Importantly, this is you're going to go into part 1. And you're going to talk a lot about your strengths and your development areas. And I know you're going to find this a bit difficult because all of you have had your assessment point 3 by and large, and you've had very little practice to do since then. So what we're using assessment point 4 to do, it's your last Viva with your mentor and your course tutor or PVT. Your teacher training coordinator will be there. So we're going to use it to do two things. One, as we said, we are going to try and focus on standard 8 and part 2, as well as a standard of your choice that you think really demonstrates you as a great teacher. But we realize that everything has changed since we made those plans. So we're not going to hold you too religiously to standard 8 and part 2, because we know that you just haven't had the ability, some of you, to do that. So we're going to ask you to reflect not just on those standards, but also on your program as a whole. If this is your last assessment point, what are your strengths right now? Please take some time to think about that, because you've had over 80 days in school. You may be feeling a bit nervous about September, but I think you should almost use this assessment point to kind of bolster your confidence. Actually, you've got a lot of strengths in the classroom. Take some time, review your folder, think about your standard 8 and part 2, your professionalism and your whole school contribution, but also what have you been great at all year? What has emerged as your strength as a really good trainee teacher? So take some time, think about that, and give yourself a little pat on the back for what you've done this year. A few of you will be wondering, do you know what, I'm still doing a lot of work in school. And initially I had been quite clear that I didn't want you to reference anything from school closures onward. I was a bit concerned that some of you who were shielding and self-isolating for health reasons may feel disadvantaged by that. But with what has panned out from the DFE, I don't think anyone will be disadvantaged. So if you have been asked by your school to continue teaching and planning and doing stuff online, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't perhaps identify that in some of your strengths and your evidence. But we'll talk about that more shortly. As usual, you'll talk about some development areas. So, you've been cut off in your prime right now. So what things will you want to really work on when you hit the ground as an NQT in September? Pop them in there. Then we have the brief narrative. And this is where you're going to reflect that things have had to happen slightly differently because of what's occurred. So tell us a lot about what you were going to do. The targets that were set at AP3, what was your plan to try and meet those? Also tell us how you're using the NASBIT Learn units to help you address some of those. We've had great feedback from you on the value of those units, so please persevere, keeping doing at least one a week, and let us know what you've learned a little bit that will be useful to you when you start as an NQT in September. Just a little bit of a narrative. You won't have many SC1s and SC2s, etc. to include. So we're kind of open to what kind of evidence you put in there. You might just tell us in here, look, I've done these NASBIT Learn units. No need to evidence that, because Dawn and I can go in every week and we can see which ones you've chosen. The SWTT secondary course tutors can also do that as well, so they will know what you've been doing. That takes us to your self-reflection, same as it's been all year. We were very fortunate as the secondary team where we had completed all but a half day's worth of training. We were able to complete our general professional studies sessions and our subject professional studies. So you had all the centre-based training at secondary. Primary, I know you've missed one or two, which Dawn is looking to fill those gaps for you, but do reflect on anything that you found useful in those last subject and general professional studies sessions you had. Here's the tricky part, the pupil progress case study. So no doubt, as you were just leaving practice there, you probably had a certain group in mind that you wanted to really do something with, maybe a couple of children in particular who stood out to you as really needing to make some progress. So perhaps you can sum up where you left off. Which classes were you really, really pushing with? Which children did you really think, I need to do something different for this child? And give us a little outline of what you had planned there, what you might have tried with that class or with that child. Again, you can also reference your NASBIT units. You can maybe reference some of the things you learned in assignment 2, which everyone did brilliantly at. So that one we're going to have to be a little bit creative with. You haven't, most of you, got children in front of you right now. So which children were on your radar as you finished in March, and what do you anticipate you might have tried with those children to really help them make some progress? Then make sure, as usual, you get this to your mentor well in advance of the date that you guys have agreed, so that they have got some time, at least 48 hours, to organize this. Your mentor will also sum up for the course of the year what's your strength been, what progress have you made, and what targets would they give you going forward. Then, of course, your SCTs and PVTs will have to think a little bit differently. Your timetable has gone out the window and you're not able to teach. But of course, our DFE compulsion for this, that you had to teach over 2 consecutive key stages, that's been removed in the light of what's happened at COVID-19. So if you're worried that you haven't done much teaching in lots of different key stages, then please do not. You will get that experience as an NQT. What will happen next is your PVT or your SCT, they will sum up the progress that you've made and they will be generous about that. They'll understand the situation. They just want to hear that you have taken on board those targets from AP3 and have made some progress towards them in the way that you can right now, whether it's through NASBIT Learn, your reading, and any work that you are able to do for schools. They'll also take this point to think about your progress since the start of the programme and your understanding of pupil progress, even if you haven't had the chance to actually get in front of children and try out some of the strategies. Obviously, in this assessment point, there will be no observed lesson, so we won't be able to have any feedback on that. But hey, you're school-centred trainees, so we've got lots of evidence of you in lessons, so we're not going to worry about that excessively at this point. Your SCT or PVT will also decide, are you still on track? If you were on track at AP3, it's very unlikely that you will be not on track at AP4. And they will set you some targets that will help inform your career entry development profile, which is your form SC4. We will talk more about an SC4 at a later date. Just remember, when you've completed this, when the trainee has completed this, trainees, please upload it to your assessment point 4 folder. But then once your SCT or PVT has completed their part, they will send it to Justina for secondary and Dawn for primary. I'm hoping that answers questions, and I'm hoping it makes some sense to you. We're all kind of, I hesitate to say winging it, but we're all kind of adjusting as we've gone along. And the main thing is we want to use some common sense about how we evidence what you have been able to do and try not to worry too much about what you haven't been able to do. Your NQT year will still feel a little bit like a training year. It always does for NQTs, and you will still have the chance to plug any gaps that you're worried that you may have. Okay, as usual, get in touch with Dawn and I if you're not sure. Otherwise, good luck, and I'm sure those are going to be fine.